Hello and welcome to another episode of the Two Guys One Roto Show. Alongside my tag team partner Rich Sayre, I am merely David Whitcomb. Hello, Rich.
Hey, hello everyone. Coming at you again. Excited for this episode.
Very excited. We've got another special guest joining us here shortly. Want to discuss the show's premise. Pretty basic. We did infield last week. So this week we're doing outfield fades and buys. What we're doing is we're doing a fade and a buy inside the top 100. And then we're doing a fade and a buy outside the top 100. And this is, again, according to FantasyPros.com. And then for wrapping it up, our fifth position is basically what we're calling a wild card. So just kind of a player that we feel good, bad, or otherwise about, just somebody we want to talk about. As always, our Two Guys One Roto Show is brought to you by FantasySixPack.net. And I would be remiss if I didn't once again mention the Fantasy Six Pack series. Once again, that's a free league against analysts from Fantasy Six Pack, from Baseball HQ, from Pitcher List, bunch more. And the winner does get a trophy from Trophy Smack. So if you could be kind enough to subscribe to our channel and like this video, or follow us wherever you're listening, be it on Apple or Spotify, you can see our Twitter and Blue Sky handles right beneath us. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the program from RotoWorld, Mr. George Bissell. George, hello.
What's going on, Dave, Rich? It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's nice to be the third guy in on the tag team here. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. Yep. So there you go.
Love having someone on from a site I visit daily. So thank you, sir.
So perfect.
It's awesome to hear. Yeah.
We really appreciate it. So. And RotoWorld is obviously an invaluable resource when it comes to the fantasy spectrum. I think everybody who has been playing fantasy sports for any number of years would call them the industry leader. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us.
Hey, I'll let you guys call us the industry leader. That's great. I appreciate that. Seriously.
Well, if not you, who? I mean, really. So,
hey, I'm not going to name names. I love everybody, especially when I'm speaking on a podcast.
Yeah,
I will say it's the busiest time of the year for us because you have spring training going on. So we're covering everything from news and injury updates, transactions, all the spring training games in Arizona and Florida.
Yeah.
So really busy time, just trying to keep up with all of it. And I think I'm more prepared than I've ever been to talk about these guys.
We appreciate it. That's perfect. Great. No.
Yep.
All right, so we'll dive right in. I think what we're going to start with, George, you're our guest, so I'll let you choose. Do you want to start with? We're going to start with the outfield inside the top 100. Do you want to start with the buy or with a fade?
I'm the bastion of negativity, so let me start there. I love a good debate. I love fades. Okay. I love being the contrarian. This is kind of my role at every place I've ever been. So let's start there.
Fantastic. All right. So why don't you give us your fade?
So I think this one's kind of obvious. He's already kind of dropping a little bit. That's Spencer Steer. He's actually dropping towards right around pick 100 at this point. It's going to continue to fall. He's been battling a shoulder issue, and it's never a good sign when a guy takes a couple months off and still can't throw at the outset of spring training. So obviously we know from a historical standpoint, the shoulder issues aren't great. The recovery timelines tend to be a lot longer. These things tend to linger. I don't like the second half performance last year. He hit 198 with 5 homers in his final 63 games after the All-Star break. I just don't see it with Steer in terms of, it's nice to have the multi-position eligibility, but I don't think the production is going to be there. And if he's dealing with a shoulder issue, the power is not going to be there to justify a top 100 pick. There's guys in the outfield I like 50, 60, 70 picks later that I just rather have. So he's a guy who I'm just kind of crossing off altogether if I'm in a traditional snake draft.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. He's a milquetoast pick without the milquetoast safety, right? So yeah, that's an interesting call there. Rich, do you want to carry us on with your fade? Because I want to save my fade for last.
Love to, yeah. So, George, appreciate your perspective on things. I had a couple choices here I could have gone with. Myself, I would love to have picked either Julio Rodriguez with his 3-year declining trend in production, or Mike Trout, especially if you're in a league that has playoffs at the end of the season. But didn't go with either of them. I'm going to go in this case with Jackson Merrill. He's at ADP 33 right now. Had an amazing season last year. Ton of heroic hits, game-winning hits, just a really exciting player. But the fade here is just that he'd really never shown this kind of power in the minors. Batting eye could use a little bit of work. He was 8th percentile in the league in walk rate, 14th percentile in chase rate. I just think it's much more likely that 2025 sees the pitchers make some adjustments versus what he was doing. And I think he could realistically end up under 2020 this year. And that's just a rough return if you're taking him 33rd overall.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I wrote up Jackson Merrill in our outfield overview article for Fantasy Six Pack as a guy, similar thoughts basically, where I think he'd be a little higher on the steals, maybe not. I think maybe doesn't get to 20 dingers, but maybe does exceed 20 steals. But again, for a pick, basically early third round, that's a lot, not a lot of return on value or return on investment. Okay. My fade inside the top 100, I should have mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is outfield or utility. So, or DHs, because there's nowhere else to put them. So we put them here. In this same space, on this same show that had like 14 viewers last year before we got teamed up for the six pack, I called Shohei Ohtani your number one overall pick, regardless of your format. And if you were doing redraft, if you're doing a keeper, if you're doing a startup dynasty, I don't care. Number one, regardless of format. Well, this year, he's going to stay spectacular, but he's my fade. I'm saying in daily formats where you can use him as both the DH and a starting pitcher, or on some platforms you can still do that. I think Yahoo somehow allows that. I know ESPN I don't think does. Fantrax I don't believe does either. I might be persuaded otherwise. But coming back as a pitcher, I just think that's going to adversely affect his hitting some. Steamer projects him for a relatively modest. This is insane to say this is modest. 43 dingers and 34 steals with a 156 WRC plus, which are out of this world numbers. But I have a different guy in mind for the 1-1. Not that you should take him with the 1-1, but whatever. We'll get to that here momentarily. But bottom line is, in the post Mike Trout era, I don't see pretty much anybody repeating as a 1-1. And Shohei is going to continue that trend. So Shohei is still going to be a great player, but not your 1-1. So that's my insane take to start off the show.
And I think it's a crime if you're in a weekly league and you have to choose whether he's your hitter or your pitcher. Terrible, un-American. But un-American. So, George, why don't you lead us off with outfield buys? Now let's get some positivity.
I don't know how to follow. I don't think Shohei Ohtani is going to be good this year. But
I didn't say he wasn't going to be good. I just said he wasn't going to be either 1-1.
Yeah, it's a nuanced argument. I understand. The guy I really like is James Wood, just because I think the floor has been raised pretty exponentially over the last few years with some of the adjustments he made last year in terms of shortening his swing, able to generate more contact, really cut back on the strikeouts, put up some huge numbers in the minors. I think just given his size, he's going to continue to have these sort of lingering, nagging physical issues. You're already seeing that a little bit in spring training, dealing with relatively minor injury. All indications are he's going to be able to come back in DH later this week. So that's something to watch. Just when you're that big, things tend to happen to you. We've seen that a lot through history with guys with his size, but the combination of power and speed from an athletic standpoint, I think is really impressive, and he hits the ball really hard. So that tends to lead to inflated BABIPs. So I don't worry as much about the batting average, even if he's striking out close to 30% of the time. I look at him as a pretty relatively safe 2020 guy. And, we'll talk about some other guys who've made some leaps and I think are going to be in that range power speed wise, but I think just the floor is so high and his ceiling's really impressive if he reaches it. So I like locking in that baseline, and I don't think you have to spend a top 30 pick on him. He's going quite a bit later than that. So that's the guy I like in the top 100. I just feel great about him.
Rich is a big fan of James Wood, calling him a potential 40-40 guy for this year. And frankly, I would take James Wood straight up over Jackson Merrill, and he's going 36 picks later. So
there you go.
It's an argument. I think the thing with Merrill is that he's still so young. He's kind of growing into his frame physically, so it wouldn't be shocking for him to add a little bit more power. He kind of reminds me a lot of Francisco Lindor, where when you looked at him, he moved quickly. He didn't hit a lot of power in the minors, but once he got to the big leagues and started filling out physically and continued to improve, power started to show up. So that's kind of the trajectory I think Merrill is on. I just think the floor is so high with Wood because he kind of does everything well in terms of his athleticism, being able to hit for power, also run. And I just think he's kind of the total package from a floor standpoint.
Makes sense. So, Rich, you want to go next with your buy? You want me to?
Yeah, no, I'll jump in here. This is going to be the second call out to the same guy I just mentioned. My sleeper or my buy inside the top 100 here is going to be Lawrence Butler. And the call out is I think Lawrence Butler is actually what everyone seems to talk about Julio Rodriguez being. The big question people seem to have on him as a prospect was the hit tool. But he ran a solid enough contact rate last year. He was around 75%. Solid chase rate. It was only a month worth of games in AAA, but he was up to 82% contact there. So I think the potential is here. I think he's being slept on a fair amount, that he gets around to 80% contact in the bigs. He's got fantastic power, really simple setup and swing. Doesn't have elite foot speed even, but he still went 18 for 18 in steals last year in the bigs and 7 for 8. In AAA. So, he's not just leaning on tools. He's got the acumen. He's got the game knowledge. I think personally he's a lock for at least a 30-20 season. I think depending on how often he runs, depending on the BABIP gods, you could easily get 290 and 30-30 at the end of the day, and he's ADP 85 right now. So I think that's a tremendous value. I think that's somebody you can build a foundation around.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with the news that the whatever the hell they are, the Athletics are batting him leadoff this year. So that just generates more volume for you in, especially in points leagues, but in roto leagues too. So, all right. So my buy, you'll find once again that I don't know, leaning towards the top of the scale, I guess is what it boils down to, which is true of me in real life too. But anyway, that's another story altogether. But my buy inside the top 100 is Fernando Tatis Jr. He's going 16th overall, and however high you are on this guy, it's not high enough. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to give a call out to a one-time fantasy baseball writer, Matthew Berry, who told a story of doing a neighborhood league with his kid, and his kid really wanted to draft Robert Griffin III, and he kept telling his kid, we can wait on him, and then he ended up losing out on Robert Griffin III, and the kid was devastated, right? So that's my advice when it comes to Tatis. You don't need to take him first overall. You don't need to take him second overall, but take him earlier rather than later. This is the consolidation year. 4 years ago, he had an 11% walk rate. The last 2 years, he had a 22% K rate. This year, he puts it all together, goes 150 games, gets on base almost 250 times, 40-40 season, 200 plus runs plus RBIs, great defense, which is near and dear to my heart. We're talking about, by the end of the season, we're talking about this guy in the discussion for one of the best players in baseball. So that's my take on buy on Tatis. George, you have something to say?
Now I wish I had gone with Tatis as my fade. He's actually one of the guys I've struggled with ranking because I do a lot of the dynasty rankings, I should say, at RotoWorld. I do all of them. And I'm not sure. The physical issues concern me a little bit, and we can make the durability argument for most guys, but played only 102 games last year. So I was worried that the volume's not going to be there to drive that true 1-1 type of value. That would be a concern. I thought Rich made a really good point on Lawrence Butler. There's actually a really interesting article from MLB.com that detailed sort of the adjustments he made working with the A's director hitting Darren Bush. Last summer, he made some mechanical tweaks to his swing that really helped unlock things for him. So it's not just like, he got lucky and a BABIP spike resulted in this production. He actually made some tangible changes to what he was doing at the plate. So I totally am in on Lawrence Butler, and I'd be surprised if they didn't get this extension done with him that they've been rumored to be working on. That's a big deal. I'd like to see the Athletics get that done.
Yeah,
right.
And he's a good kind of like Brent Rooker, where he's not going to reach free agent because he's a little older, arriving in the bigs. He's not going to reach free agency until his post-peak years. So he'd do him well to buy out his arbitration years for some money. So, All right. Do we want to go back to fades or do we want to stay in the buy category?
Let's stay in the buys because
Stay in the buys. Okay.
Yeah, I think I've been pretty consistent on the guy I like who's going just a little bit outside the top 100. That's Parker Meadows, the Detroit Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
I just think what he did, he made another guy who made a swing adjustment. And, we can talk about guys who make adjustments and they don't work a lot. So it's not a guarantee anytime somebody makes a change. Oh, so-and-so's adding a new pitch or they overhauled their swing. They changed their offensive approach. You got to see it in games. And the thing that's encouraging for me with Meadows is we actually saw it down the stretch. Hit close to 300 down the home stretch, was hitting for power. Obviously, we know the speed is there. He's a good defender in center field. So he's the guy who stands out to me as I think it all comes together from a fantasy standpoint where these are the types of guys you want to look for who can help you out in all 5 categories and they make a big leap forward offensively. So he kind of fits that mold for me. I just really think Parker Meadows, if he stays healthy, which has been an issue for him, he's been hurt a bunch. But if he's on the field, I think he's going to be really productive for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, totally agree. You had a couple other buys. Do you want to touch on one other one of them or do you want to just let it go?
I'll hit on one more. I don't know how to explain this, and this is a guy I've been mystified by since my days at Baseball Prospectus when I was kind of like Victor Robles is better than Ronald Acuna. Was one of my more famous takes.
Hey,
I think.
Time will tell.
Brave to call that back. Yeah. Okay.
Time will.
Well, look.
Tell.
I don't know everything. You get stuff wrong. I thought Robles was going to be kind of like a Starling Marte type, where I just thought the floor was going to be so high because we saw it last year. When he gets on base at a halfway decent clip, he can steal bases. He's impactful. I just think it's hard to look at him and say something really changed last year from a batted ball standpoint. He did strike out less once he got to Seattle, but other than just an environmental change, not a lot of factors were different, but the Mariners seem committed to him as kind of their table setter, and they're going to give him the green light on the base paths. Like, it wouldn't be shocking if he led the majors in steals or something crazy. Like, it's within the realm of possibility. So I just think, this maybe is happening. As impossible as it seems, like it might finally be Victor Robles' time.
Let's play the recency bias game. Who was better last year, Robles or Acuna? I mean, come on. So there you go.
Long career arc, right? I still have time.
And I don't have the data or the article or whatever it was in front of me, but I do remember seeing something about when he got to Seattle, they encouraged him to swing harder. And his bat speed picked up and his hard hit rate picked up. Coupling that with striking out less. If you can hold those gains, to your point, George, like he might really, this might be, sometimes guys, Rich and I argue about this all the time, is that prospect development is not always linear. He might just put it together at age 27 and become the player we always thought he could be. So,
I mean, at the end of the day, these guys are human. And sometimes when you have the weight of being the franchise player on you at such a young age and, Juan Soto leaves and then like you're the guy, and he kind of tried to change who he was as a player to be that type of franchise guy, and it never really worked out with the Nationals. And he's had some quotes about it. Like, it felt like a weight was off his shoulders when he left. Like, it's really bizarre, but it feels like he's finally comfortable being who he was always supposed to be now that he's in Seattle. So if everything's changed for him, I think it could really be a special year.
Nice.
I like what you said also because, I'd like once I'm out on somebody, it's very hard to win me back over. And I didn't see a lot that changed with Robles, but I also didn't find any holes to poke in what he did last year. So I don't know. Good luck to him, but it'll be interesting this year.
Like if you were a top 100 pick, I'd be skeptical, but you don't have to pay that price. I mean, just looking at the FantasyPros ADP, I think he's going outside the top 225 right now. So, you don't have a lot to lose at that ADP.
Right. And to your point, you might end up getting the guy who leads the league in steals. So, there you go.
Not bad.
Rocket Richard, do you want to go next or do you want me to?
I could bring it back to Motown because my sleeper, my buy outside the top 100 is another Tiger. I went with Kerry Carpenter. I think he had a pretty big under the radar ish season last year, unless maybe you had him on your team. He had 2.5 WAR in only 87 games and playing close to half those games as a DH. 160 WRC plus, 300 plus ISO. But if you're looking at just the raw numbers, you got a guy with 18 home runs, 57 ribbies, The real story here is the back injury. Injuries usually don't decrease in likelihood as a player gets older. But in 2022, he played around 130 games. In 23, he played 127 games. So I think there's an easy-ish path there to staying a little bit healthier this year, playing a similar number of games to that, around that 120, 130 range. And that's going to give you 30 home runs, 90 RBIs with a 280-ish batting average. And at 196 ADP, around 14, 15, or 16 in the draft, that's adding a lot of value to your team.
Yep, no doubt about it. Kerry Carpenter also, I don't know if you saw the article, Rich, but he is like steadfast in his want to improve against left-handers. He basically begged AJ Hinch to let him play against lefties all spring, and then when he's not playing, he wants to go and work in the cages against lefties. Like he recognizes it's a flaw of his, and he wants to work on it. Whether it'll be successful, we'll see. But
I love that. Yeah, he hasn't been terrible. I was looking at the splits on that. He hasn't been good, but that could go either way. If it takes your average a little bit, that's not great in the roto format. But I love the attitude.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So
one thing I think people aren't focusing on either with Kerry Carpenter is the rest of that offensive nucleus for Detroit has gotten a lot better in the last year or two. They added Gleyber Torres. If Parker Meadows is good at the top of that order, they also have Riley Green as kind of the franchise cornerstone, middle of the order guy too. So, and then they have a bunch of prospects on the way that are making an impact too. So
yeah, Spencer Torkelson. Oh wait.
Yeah, maybe not him, but speaking of great stories, there's one that he just basically ignores what they try to tell him to do.
Right.
That's incredible. Haven't heard that before. So yeah, I'm not high on him. I'd be fading him. And but to Rich's point, like that Detroit line is pretty good, and that's gonna drive Kerry Carpenter's counting stats. And there's huge power upside here based on the batted ball data. Like a full healthy season is off the charts for him.
Yeah, no, I actually just not to pile on Spencer Torkelson here or whatever, because we all hope that everybody does well and whatever. But my boss is actually good in my quote unquote regular job is the big baseball fan, and we talked about that. Like, imagine doing that in any other walk of life. Like, I'm a mortgage underwriter by trade. Imagine my boss coming to me, "Hey, we really need you to look at tax returns this way." Nah, I'm not going to do that.
I got to just go by feel, I just got to do what's right for me.
Right. No.
Well, they're trying to help him is the scary thing. Like this isn't some negative conversation. This is supposed to be helpful information.
Yes.
Not getting there, which is concerning.
Yeah, so. Well, you said that you live in the negative world or whatever it was, George, when we started off. So we're just trying to make our guests comfortable here. So,
yeah, I feel at home now. This is where I belong.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. So my outfield buy is way, way off the chart, but it's MJ Melendez, who's going at 426. So he's basically free. This is I kind of captioned this by saying this is more fun with guys who maybe have peaked 4 years ago. But I'm a big believer in Rich knows this. I'm a big believer in follow the pedigree. If they had prospect pedigree once upon a time, I'll take all the top 20 draft picks, all the top 25 prospects. Like, give me them all, and I'll take my chances with that team, and hopefully it'll work out in the long run. Whatever. Obviously, they don't always work out, but he was the 52nd overall pick in the 2017 draft. He was a former top 50 prospect, and George, you talked about it. Lo and behold, swing change. Not that always works, but they're talking it up a lot in camp that it looks different. It's a shorter stroke to the ball. Hopefully it'll work out some of his strikeout numbers. His batting average has always been a huge drain in roto formats. But he's already armed with a top quarter in the league hard hit and average exit velocity. So if he can cut down on the punchies just a little bit, maybe this is the year he lives up to the billing rather. So MJ Melendez basically free. I don't know that he's going to get you a huge return on investment, but 20 to 23 homers with a 240 batting average, maybe like that's pretty nice for outside the top 400. So anyway, any thoughts, gents?
I kind of wonder if he's one of those guys where you tell him, like, hey, don't worry about making contact. Like, just go up there and hit for power. That's what you do.
Yeah,
so
could be.
I wonder if he's one of those where it's like, would you rather have a 220 batting average and 35 homers or 240 and 21? Like,
right. No, that's a good point.
At a certain point, is it more valuable for fantasy purposes to have the all or nothing approach? So he might be one of those guys, but I'm intrigued by the swing adjustment. I wrote that up for RotoWorld, the report. Ann Rogers from MLB.com had it, and it's basically just simplifying the approach to try to get to the ball faster. And we'll see what happens. Slow start in spring so far, but we'll see.
He could, to your point, George. Maybe he could be Kyle Schwarber without all those fussy walks.
Yeah. I mean, look, it happens. It's a guy who's talented. The power is there.
Yeah.
So let's see. It's interesting.
All right. So moving back into and actually, no, before we start the fades, before we start the outside the top 100 fades, George, you are visiting us from RotoWorld, as we mentioned, but why don't you talk a little bit about your site and where people can find you on social media and stuff?
Yeah, I would love if people could bother me on social media. That sounds like a great thing. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever you want to follow me on. I am there at George Bissell. And, RotoWorld, we're doing a lot right now, obviously, with our preseason content, just cranking out player news updates throughout the day. But we have a lot of interesting new stuff this year. One of my colleagues, Eric Samolsky, is doing a lot of the positional previews where he's going through. We have videos, projections, player profile. So all that stuff's up on the site. We got a lot of weekly columns as well. So it's kind of your one-stop shop for everything you need. I know there's a million places you can get information, but we have a really talented team of writers who've been doing this a long time, and they find the information that you're looking for. So that's my best pitch I can give you on what RotoWorld does.
There you go. The best pitch. I like it. There you go. You worked in the baseball in a metaphor. There you go. Well
home
done.
run.
Like I said earlier, I love it. I like to be thorough, so I like to go through all the blurbs. And I can say at this time of year, it's a challenge to get through the whole sequence each day.
Yeah. I mean,
in a positive way.
I mean, you can end up with a lot of sources that are just giving you selective information, a lot of confirmation bias. But I think one of the things that RotoWorld does well, and we try to preach to everybody, is we're kind of view ourselves as like a historical record, good and bad. So whatever it is, we have it there. We're covering it. So we don't really miss anything. So that's kind of the best resource I can give you. Is I like to present people with the information, draw your own conclusions. I think that's one of the best things you can do as a fantasy analyst, because people like to make their own decisions. Like at the end of the day, I can give all the information, but you have to make the decision on what's best for your roster.
Right. So like not taking Shohei Ohtani number 1 overall, for example. So yeah.
When is that blurb going to be up?
Right. Yes. So this is going to be the last episode of Two Guys One Roto. I also did want to mention, I can't recommend it highly enough, George. I don't know what platform you use for your leagues and that kind of stuff, but Rich and I both we moved our main league, our home league, whatever you want to call it, to Fantrax a couple of years back. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Their platform is so much more stout than everybody else's, especially if you use minor leaguers. And you go to right now, there's a promo going on. You go to fantrax.com/fantasy6pack. You can sign up for free. And it is just absolutely an incredible platform with the customizable features and with, like I said, the minor leaguers and all sorts of different things that you can do just that other sites just don't allow. So can't recommend it highly enough. Fantrax.com/fantasy6pack. Go ahead and move your league over today because you won't regret it. I promise you that. So. All right. So we will now move into George's comfort zone, into the fades. And George, do you want to lead off the fades, or do you want somebody else to lead off the fades this time?
Well, why don't you guys do that? Because I'll chime in as we go here. I love adding to the negativity.
Yes, I've been talking.
Piling on.
Rich, I've been talking. So you go ahead and lead off our fades, bud.
Yeah. One of the things I'm grateful for, by the way, is that you take care of all that stuff on this wonderful Two Guys One Roto show. Appreciate that, Dave. My fade is actually somebody that we were chatting about recently. You brought this up to me, so I'll give you some credit there as well. My fade is going to be Adolis Garcia. He's at ADP 125 right now. Wouldn't really have been on my radar. Not something I would have dove into. I was actually kind of vibing with the Rangers lineup, some of the changes they made this year. But once you kind of dig into his recent numbers, it's kind of hard to unsee. So what I'm talking about, he's not necessarily old per se. He's 32 this year, but there's a lot of warning signs in his season last year. Now, they're starting to talk about, maybe that knee injury was a little bit more significant than they let on throughout the season last year, but you're looking at a drop from 126 to 92 in your WRC plus, 4-year trend in declining foot speed, which is correlated to a huge drop-off in his outfield range and defensive value. He went from 71st percentile in bat speed to 54th, from 23 to 24. And it seems like people are just assuming he's going to bounce back. He's going to hit those 30 home runs again. But if this is the start of a physical decline and it continues, or even if it just kind of plateaus here, there's a real possibility that he ends up shifting to, I think, maybe a part-time role by the end of the season. And when you look at 2021 to 23, the 23 season that he had was a really kind of an outlier one in terms of better chase rate, better contact percentage versus all of his other recent seasons. So I don't think you should just automatically be chasing that he's going to return to that level. And so he's my fade outside of the top 100.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The thing that I had to say about Adolis, I don't know if you remember, Rich, but the leading indicator is defense. Once the defensive skills go, the offensive skills tend to follow, and they tend to follow quickly because you're just losing your athleticism. And so I don't know if Adolis is going to fall off the map altogether, but I do actually agree with you. I'm not all in on Adolis even being a full-time player for the Rangers by the end of the year. George, any thoughts there? Or?
So one interesting thing that I noticed today from Texas's lineup in a spring training game was that Leody Taveras played right field. So just something to watch. They have two other guys who are also capable of being everyday outfielders. In Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter, obviously. And then they also have a couple versatile guys who can play in the outfield as well. Jock Peterson technically could be an outfielder if they want to give him a glove, but he's probably going to be at DH. So, yeah, I think if Garcia's not right physically, like, what's the incentive to push him out there? They have alternatives. So that could eat into his playing time. And when you're talking about a guy who's going in the top, 125, that's a huge risk. And we talked about a couple guys we like who are in that range. The Lawrence Butlers, the Parker Meadows. Like, you can get other guys, Dylan Cruz. Like, there are other guys. Just you don't have to take them.
Right. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead with my fade, and it's perhaps surprising coming from a Yankees fan. And I'm not trying to regurgitate my outfield overview at Fantasy Six Pack, but my fade is Jason Dominguez, the Martian. He is going at ADP 154 right now. Now he's known for his power, but in any season in which he played at least 40 games, so like any real sample size, he's never posted an ISO better than 190, which is not bad, but not like, not for a guy who's a power first prospect, not stellar. He stole a bunch of bases, but that's against cruddy minor league competition where the defense is terrible and the pitchers don't hold runners as well and all that stuff and whatever. Frankly, there's a lot of guys in his same range or even later that I would rather take. I'd rather take Taylor Ward. I'd rather take Alec Burleson. I'd rather take even like in Rich's guy, Kerry Carpenter, in redraft, and maybe even in like a keeper league where you're only keeping him for say like 2-3 years or whatever. Probably not in dynasty, but in say redraft or short-term keeper leagues, I think there's much safer picks, especially when you're investing a top 150 pick or 154 or whatever top 150 pick in a guy that just hasn't really shown anything at the big league level of any consequence. And I'm not altogether convinced that he's ever going to, but that's another conversation altogether. So we shall see. George, any thoughts on the Martian?
Oh man, I totally like disagree with all of that.
Okay.
Look, I think any scout
Variety is the spice of life.
Well, look, I think any scout I've had a conversation with is a believer in the talent, and I think that's the thing that stands out to me the most. Is anytime you're looking at an elite talent, you have to bet on it eventually coming through in some capacity. And basically, New York needs him. It doesn't sound like Giancarlo Stanton's coming back. Like he might. I don't. No one really knows at this point. Like it'll come out in a couple of days, probably what's going on. But it doesn't sound like he's anywhere close to coming back and playing baseball this year. So New York kind of needs him to play and be an impact contributor. And to me, you're right. There's a chance he's bad this year just because of all the time off, the layoff. Like he might not be good, but to me, it's kind of like a weird, like Jose Ramirez type of profile where you're like, okay, what does he do well? And it just kind of works.
Right.
So it's hard to explain. Like, I believe in the talent is where I stand on it. And if he's going to get an opportunity to play every day and it's such a good ballpark, I want to see a little bit here. Like, I'm not willing to totally write him off yet. And I don't think the acquisition cost is like astronomical. I don't think a top 150 pick is crazy right now.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So you got, I think, 2 fades for us possibly, George. Is that cool? Do you want to run with both you guys?
I'll go through them real quick. Randy Arozarena is the one to me because just diving into Nevada ball data, it's being propped up unsustainably. I think, in my opinion, like it's a lot of luck here. I don't really believe in him going forward. And the other guy is Jordan Walker, just because we have, he's changed his swing again. We did this last year. He's looked good in some spring training games so far.
Right.
Look, I just said, like, you got to believe in elite talent, but we're getting to the point where, unlike Dominguez, who's been hurt and hasn't really played a lot, Walker's been playing. Like, in the minors, the production kind of wasn't there. It wasn't making hard contact. Like, I'm just a little bit wary of the narrative here with Jordan Walker. Like, I just want to see it for a little bit of an extended period. And if he's not producing, like, the Cardinals have options. Like, Victor Scott looks like, okay, maybe he can play. So maybe they need to get him in there. So they're going to give Walker a chance to be their everyday right fielder. I get it. But it's going to take more than like a bunch of spring training games for me to believe that this is real if he's actually changed his swing.
Right. Yeah. And actually you mentioned, so he had, I don't have the number in front of me, but in 2023, he had something like a 117 WRC plus in the majors, which is fine. Yeah, good, whatever. But you just mentioned Giancarlo Stanton, not for our purposes, but rather just like we don't know what's going on with that guy. And everybody, I'm a Yankee fan, whatever, and everybody on Yankees Twitter always wants to talk about how great Stanton is. And I always remind them, yes, okay, his hitting numbers are fine, but he can't play defense or run the bases, right? And that's Jordan Walker can run the bases some, but he can't play defense. And so to your point, if he's not a good defender and if he's not hitting a bunch, they're going to cut back that playing time with a quickness. They've got Burleson, they've got Lars Nootbaar, they've got Victor Scott, they got Michael Ciani. I mean, that's 4 guys right off the bat that are already on the big league roster, to say nothing of anybody who might come up from the minors. So
he's still young. I'm not willing to write it off completely, but I just want to be cautious with the narrative that, like, okay, everything's fixed and this is it. Like, he's going to be fine. Like, just let's see it for a little while before we go buying in completely that he's going to realize his potential.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. And friend of the show, Eric Polsky, will hate that take. So I just got to give him a shout out. But anyway,
but he won't listen to it. So
he won't listen to it anyway because he's a terrible person. All right. We're moving into our last round, our wild card round. Who wants to lead us off in the wild cards?
I could jump in.
Not everybody just start at once.
I could jump in on another topic that a friend of the show, Eric Polsky, would enjoy. My wild card, I'm going to choose Christian Campbell. And he's getting a lot of love right now. In some ways, it's not clear when he's going to be up, or I guess technically if he's going to be up this year. So you get kind of why the ADP is 288. He's not nearly as well known to casuals, people that don't follow prospects, or people playing only in redraft. He's only had one, really, really successful season in the minors. But sometimes you also have to listen to what the real major league team might be telling you, or at least read between the lines. So it's true. We're not sure right now if Campbell's going to be up. It's also not true if he's going to really perform out of the gate. There were a lot of pretty well-hyped prospects last year that didn't have very good seasons or very meaningful fantasy seasons. But on a team that's got Rafael Devers, Trevor Story, Jarren Duran, Alex Bregman, all playing positions that Campbell plays, it really feels like they're trying to give him a very clear path to punch his own ticket and make the team. So he's got limited experience in AAA. Even at that level, he had an 82% contact rate, elite chase rate only 19%. This syncs up with kind of the scouting report on him with the plus hit tool, and with the swing adjustments that he made last year. Potentially unlocking plus power and with plus speed, you have, maybe one of the better top hitting packages in the league at 288. So I think you give that a run and you see where it takes you.
There you go.
He's one of the most difficult prospects to analyze because there is a segment of the sort of scouting community that is very skeptical of Christian Campbell. That what he's doing is not going to work at the highest level. And I think that's interesting. And we have to kind of weigh that into our analysis when we look at things. And especially when I'm, putting together dynasty rankings, like I think there's quite a number of people who are fans of what he did and believe in the profile. And then there's other people who are a little more skeptical. So that's just something to watch. But I think the stolen bases are really going to be the thing that's impactful from a fantasy standpoint. Like no matter what, he's going to come up and play and he's going to run. So I think that's going to make a difference. And Trevor Story, here is games played the last 3 years, 94, 43, 26. So
back to the negativity.
Christian Campbell's going to play. He's going to be, my personal opinion on this whole thing is that I think Devers is going to move off of third base. They're going to play Bregman there just because of the defense.
Would make sense. Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to keep him there by
sooner or later. Yeah.
Like by traditional or advanced metrics, he's either the worst third baseman in baseball defensively or just the American League, like over the last few years. So what is the incentive to keep him there? I just think Bregman's going to play third quite a bit, if not every day.
So
it's the best move.
Yep. So George, you want to go give us your wild card next, or you want me to go next, buddy?
You can do it. I'll end with mine because mine's way off the board.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, I've got one way off the board too, but that's fine. I'll give you. So I'm giving you two for the price of none, because one, this podcast doesn't cost anything, and two, both these guys are basically not going to cost you anything in your drafts. So one is, we talked about milquetoast player earlier. I've got another one for you, Andrew Benintendi. He's going at ADP 403, so for all intents and purposes free, except for in your especially deep leagues. I will give our listeners a minute here. We should have like a moment of silence for our listeners to stop laughing at me. But really, he's going to hit third in this White Sox lineup behind Mike Tauchman, who, laugh all you want, but he's got a career almost 13% walk rate, and Luis Robert. And post All-Star break last year, Benny really turned it around. He had an 830 OPS, he had a 133 WRC plus, and he hit 13 dingers. There is some caution because he's probably not going to play every single day against probably one of these situations where he sits against the tough lefties and plays against the Andrew Heaney's of the world kind of thing. But especially in daily formats, I think there's actually some value to be had there at 403. Like if you're filling out, say, your standard 5x5 roto roster for the fifth outfielder, Benny might be a good choice for you. My other one is just a fun one, and this is just it's horseshit is what it is. But so what this one is for those of you who don't know, the San Francisco Giants have not had a 30 home run hitter since Barry Bonds in 2004. Okay, so they're going on 20 years without a 30-year home run hitter. Brandon Belt hit 29 for them in 2017 in a truncated season, so he would have got there, but he got hurt. But my pick is Gerard Encarnacion, whose ADP I didn't even put down because it was it's like incalculable. So he's out of options though. So he's got to stay up with the big league club. His impediments to playing time are three renowned healthy players: Lamont Wade, Mike Yastrzemski, and Wilmer Flores. And smart money is, for me anyway, is on nobody to break that streak this year. The smart money is for nobody to hit 30 home runs for the San Francisco Giants this year. That streak stays alive. But if somebody's going to do it, I'm going to put I'm going to slide a chip on the roulette table of Gerard Encarnacion. He's got 49 tanks in the minor leagues in Mexican ball in the last 2 years, and he's got power to spare. They're giving him a glove at first base. I don't know. Maybe he just usurps Lamont Wade's job and hits dingers. Kind of the MJ Melendez thing you were talking about earlier. So,
yeah. I think Bryce Eldridge would be the guy who comes he's already in AAA, and I think his power
certainly, but Bryce is probably not on the 40-man yet, I would imagine.
Well, if he's, I'm not saying he's going to come up and play for like a week. Like if there were an injury, a long-term injury, and there was an opportunity there.
I see. Yeah.
I can't imagine them giving Encarnacion a first baseman's club for an extended period. Like,
no,
you might as well just call up Bryce Eldridge at that point if he's proven.
Sure. But the at least according to Roster Resource on Fangraphs, they have Lamont Wade at first and Wilmer Flores at DH and Mike Yastrzemski in right field. So one of those three guys will always be hurt, and so Encarnacion will just play one of those three positions.
That's true. I think Eldridge could be up by mid-season, and
Eldridge could be. He's precocious.
That's my concern. It's just something to watch with that.
Yep. So, all right. So you got a fun one for us to close out our wild cards. Why don't you give us your fun guy?
Yeah, the buzz is kind of taking off. I got sucked in on a similar guy last year in Victor Scott, and he actually made the Cardinals opening day roster and then kind of flopped. But now it looks like it's finally going to work out, and this might be his year. So we might be early on this would be the caveat. Like, having gone through these types of situations before, you kind of see like, oh, I'm falling into this trap. And I feel like we're going down that road again here, but you never know. This might be the time you hit. And with a ADP over 600, Chandler Simpson, to me, I wrote about him for RotoWorld like 2 weeks ago, like at the start of spring training as sort of the X factor for the American League East. And he's basically the most electrifying stolen base threat since Billy Hamilton. He had 104 steals in the lower minors last year between high A and double A. So what we know is that he can run, and he's already hitting and running in spring training. I don't know if he'll hit if he gets an opportunity. Like, are we sure Johnny DeLuca is like this bona fide everyday center fielder in Tampa Bay? And I don't know that, but if the Rays decide Chandler Simpson's ready, he's immediately an impactful stolen base threat, and I want to see it. Like, he's an incredible.
He's fun to watch.
Yes.
Yeah, and Simpson,
it might be his time.
Yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the 104 steals he said he had.
Yep.
Came at, I believe, an 88% clip. So it's not only is he doing it, he's doing it efficiently. So totally agree. I had an exchange with, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this. I had an exchange with Keith Law, of all people, about Chandler Simpson, about why is this guy not a prospect as far as you're concerned. And he said it is true 20 grade power. Is like legitimately going to have trouble getting the ball out of the infield power. And so that's the question. Is he did actually hit one over the second baseman's head to the grass today. So
I was going to say he had one today.
Yeah.
I was like,
so, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely.
And he's got like actual legit elite hit rate. I was just looking up. He was 93% contact last year across two levels. So like, I don't, you look at some of the videos that have been circulating online, like, does it matter if it doesn't get out of the infield? I don't know.
But at the current cost on draft day, that's what matters here is if he were commanding a 5th round pick or some astronomical price in an auction, you probably have to worry about how you're going to structure your team. But if he's their last dart throw in an extremely deep league, like, it doesn't hurt you if it doesn't work out, or he's not hitting for power. Like, you just take the stolen base boost and go from there. So it's like a roster construction kind of thing. Just a name to watch here as spring training goes. I think the hype's going to start to build if he's like setting the Grapefruit League stolen base record. I don't even know what it is.
No, I don't think anybody should know what that is.
It's a good trivia question.
If somebody does, they should forget it.
I'm going to Google it right now.
But yeah, I saw somebody, I forget who it was, but I saw somebody today opine that, look, there's no chance this is going to be the case, but just what if he's Luis Ariz and Stephen Kwan with Billy Hamilton speed? Just what if? Like, holy crap, what a player that is.
I used to get sucked in on the whole Billy Hamilton thing. It's, again, like, you do this long enough, you learn from the experience. Like, I get it, the one category kind of contributor, but these guys do matter. And when you're talking about someone who you don't have to pay a 10th round pick for, like, that's where I'm interested in, because his acquisition cost is basically nothing.
Yep, totally agree. So, all right, any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Another great show. Yeah. No, we had the pleasure. I don't know if you know Mike Carter, Mike Carter was on with us last week doing the infield, and we had a good time with him. We had a great time with you, George. We appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to join us. Rich, always good talking with you as well.
Yeah.
That'll wrap us up for this week. Join us next week for our pitcher fades and buys with yet another special guest. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Catch you next time.